Morning everyone, it's great to be here. It's a good few years, but maybe some of you were here when I last came, which I think was 2 or 3 years ago now. But as introduced by Mike, I am going to share some examples of good practice in the NHS. You might be thinking, well, why are you well placed to do that? Who are you? So I'll tell you a little bit more about SWM and where our understanding of this good practice comes from. So we were set up back in 2002, so we've been going 20 years now. We're based in Birmingham, but we cover the whole of the West Midlands, so that's the sort of core areas of Birmingham, Solihull, Black Country, Coventry and Warwickshire, but the wider area including Herefordshire, Shropshire, Stoke-on-Trent and Staffs as well. So it's quite a big geography. We're independent, we're not for profit, and we really do work very much across all of the sectors, including the NHS. So we have a vision for the region, and what we'd really like to see is that our region is leading on bringing down carbon emissions, obviously in line with government targets, but really importantly, and I think very relevant for today, is we really need to address health inequality. It's not a problem that is unique to the West Midlands, but we've got massive issues in health inequality here. And Solihull, where we're based this morning, the difference in life expectancy between the most and the least deprived areas is 11 years, which to me is just not acceptable, which is why we're doing a lot with the health sector. Our vision also includes a target to address inclusive growth. So yes, we're all pushing for economic growth, but it has to benefit everybody, not just the select few. So we've got our vision, and underneath that we have a roadmap to 2030, and we've got 8 priority areas, and that's the little bubbles that you'll see there. And we monitor every year how the region is doing, so we look at progress, and that insight and evidence gives us the information to go back to policymakers and say, we're doing well here, this is great, but equally we need more action in many of these areas. So there's 3 main areas of our work, and this is where the good practice comes through. So we're a membership organisation, very much cross-sector. We have about 130 actually, I think, probably now, very different members, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The idea of the membership is we get to know our members and we find out what they're offering, what they're doing with regard to sustainability, and we promote that. It's all about learning from each other, to be honest. There's so much good practice to be shared. The second area of our work is consultancy, so we work on a one-to-one basis with organisations, and that has included NHS trusts across our time. So again, we're aware of really good examples that are happening across our region. And as important as the good examples, it's the learning from what hasn't quite gone right, and we're keen to share that where we can as well. And then finally, it's about engagement. So we really believe that if you are working on sustainability, you don't need to do it alone. Somebody else has probably tried before you. Let's share that knowledge. And we do that through our communications, but also through our networks. And we have got a couple of networks focused on the NHS and public health. So if you'd like to find out more, let me know, they're free to join. So going back to our roadmap, I'm just going to flash that up again. I'm going to come back to that at the end because I'm hoping that the couple of case studies I can talk you through this morning will come back to the difference that they've made to these areas. So I mentioned our members. There's a little snapshot, hopefully can just about make it out. Some notable names in there that you probably recognise, others that you won't because they're tiny charities, they're micro businesses, but they all get the same amount of attention as members of SWM. So I'm going to talk through a couple of case studies. They're very different, but I hope that they illustrate different approaches that have been taken and the benefits that they have brought when it comes to sustainability. And the first that I'd like to talk about is a medical centre, Foles Hill Medical Centre in Coventry, which the reason I want to share this one is that it is the first NHS healthcare building that has been certified to Passive House standards in the UK, which is quite an achievement. But before I tell you about that example in detail, I will just tell you a bit more about Passive House. I'm sure there's probably a couple of experts or more in the audience, but probably not that many. So I'll just briefly run through the concept. So The reason this is important is that our buildings are a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. We have to heat them, we have to cool them, we have to provide waste services. So, of course, significant carbon emissions, and most of that is down to the energy use. So about 35% of our energy is used in heating and cooling our buildings. So the principle of passive house is it's looking at the building and it is making sure that whether it's a new building or an old building that's being retrofit, it is net zero ready, so maybe not necessarily net zero now, but it's ready for new technology. And also, really importantly, it is focused on the comfort of people working and using those buildings, obviously in a healthcare setting, hugely important. So, as I say, high levels of comfort and very little energy used to heat and cool the building, and I'll tell you a bit more through this case study. So it's very much a whole building approach. It could be a house, it could be a commercial property. It will have targets, it will have high quality construction methods, and then it is, importantly, it's certified by a very stringent assurance process. So that's the principles of passive house, and then this is the example that I wanted to share with you in Coventry. So the reason I'm aware of this one is because Arden Estates Partnerships are one of our members, and they were the development management company involved here. They worked with 3 other partners, so Porter Cabin as the main contractor, AECOM as the consultants, you've probably heard of both of those, and then Tooley Foster Architects, who are the passive house experts here. So some statistics about the building, quite considerable building with serving about 10,000 residents in inner city Coventry. So 5 consulting rooms, 2 treatment rooms. As I've said, the design is all about comfort, so there's a big focus on using natural light and making sure that it's nice to be inside, which is really important. When we go into the doctors, it's often not a particularly nice experience. And I think one thing that's really interesting here is that actually the time to construct this building was pretty swift and a lot quicker than your traditional methods because of the modern methods of construction. I can never say that, that we used. So as well as the energy credentials, it was also put up pretty quickly as well and started treating patients in August. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What does this actually mean? Passive house, great, but what are the features of the building? So it's very well insulated. So in the winter, it's warm. In the summer, it's cool. It's very airtight as well, and that's really important. It is really important to be aware in any passive house building that a lot of the efficiency is dependent on the behaviour of the people using the building. So that's just as important in, sort of educating the occupants as it is designing the building itself. Very triple glazed windows, so obviously, limited, very limited for drafts, but also kind of gaining heat and so on in the summer. And all of the rooms have got filtered air coming in, so it's clean and it's a pleasant environment to be in. And actually that air quality is really high. It's the same as an operating theatre. Really important, obviously, throughout the pandemic and beyond. In terms of heating, each hot water tap has its own little heater, so you're not sort of heating, unnecessary quantities of water as well. It's heated at the point of demand, and there is a small heating system in the building as well, which uses heat recovery pumps, so it's using heat from the ground, essentially, to heat the building. Solar panels on the roof, we're probably all familiar with, and then the lighting is low energy consumption LED lighting. And there's no fossil fuels used in the building, which is obviously a massive achievement. So alongside the passive house principles, they've also integrated measures to try and allow their staff and their visitors to access the building efficiently. So there's EV charging there, there's bike racks, and it's obviously, being in a city, it's well served by public transport. I know that doesn't always apply. And so far, no, it's only been operational a year, so it is early days, but there are significant carbon savings predicted here, so in the region of 400 tonnes of carbon. So hopefully, obviously it remains to be seen as the building is used more and there's more data available, but it should be an efficient building to use, low energy consumption, and of course with that comes lower costs, particularly at the moment in the energy crisis. So that was the first example that I wanted to share with you. The second is very, very different, and this is around the change from single-use sharps containers to reusable. And this, it's important. Clinical waste is in the, sort of top areas to be looked at by the NHS supply chain when it comes to carbon footprint. So it's noted that these type of containers have a big impact, and actually it is recommended that if you can, moving to the reusable option is going to have a positive impact. So how does this work? With your traditional single-use container, once they get full, they are simply taken away for disposal. So the whole unit and its contents is incinerated. You're left with some ash, and that will tend to go to landfill. Now, of course, there have been really good reasons for that, sort of hygiene and infection control, but actually technology has moved on. So with the reusable option, as the name suggests, when the bin gets full, it goes off and it's emptied. The contents is incinerated generally, but the bin itself is cleaned very, very thoroughly, obviously robotically. There's a picture of that on the bottom there. Once it's passed its quality check, it will go back out to the trust, and it has a long lifespan, obviously, compared to those single-use items. So in the UK at the moment, we've only got 2 suppliers. I think this is up to date. Somebody will probably tell me I'm wrong, but I think there's only 2 suppliers. So we've got Sharp Smarts, and that's the containers you can see on the right there, left there. And we've got Stericycle, which is the other supplier. So there are limited suppliers, but they are well used and well proven. So this was a study that we were involved with. The reason that we were involved is because we had done some work with University Hospitals, Coventry and Warwickshire on a sort of small scale, and that then fed into this big study which involved 40 trusts. As I say, a couple of local ones there, but there were many more besides. And it looked at data for a year. So again, it is quite a short duration, but still I think the results are really interesting. So what did it show? It showed that combined across those 40 trusts, the global warming potential, or the amount of carbon emissions essentially, was reduced by over 3,000 tonnes, which is just under 84%. So that is really considerable when you think of the sheer number of these things in circulation. Now, I'll put the little graph on there just to show you where those savings have come from. Don't worry so much about, the numbers. Probably can't read them anyway. But the reason that graph is there is to show you that the main differences come from the manufacture of the bins themselves. Obviously, if we're making less, we're not going to be using raw materials, energy, water in that production, and then also in the treatment and disposal. So it just shows you across the life cycle where those savings have come from. Other benefits were reduction in the amount of waste going to incineration, so plastic reduced as well, and cardboard going for disposal or recycling. And I don't know the reason for this, but I suspect it is due to the packaging of those single-use items being reduced. But if anybody was going to ask that, I can take that one away as a question. And of course, the number of exchanges of containers is significantly lower, 60%. So it's quite an efficient process, I think, once you've got it in place. And the study was obviously peer-reviewed, critiqued, and published in the British Medical Journal. Now, the other thing we found when we did the smaller study in Coventry and Warwickshire, we spoke to the people using the bins, and actually, alongside the numbers, which are really interesting, we spoke to the staff using these bins, and they said, we just like them so much more. We feel much less at risk from getting a needle stick injury, a sharps injury, And actually that makes us, more comfortable using these things. And when we looked across the data for needle stick injuries, I think we looked at 3 years, you could see the difference. So that isn't statistically sound, that was a small pilot, but still, good feedback from the trust there. So those are the 2 examples I wanted to share with you. I hope you can see that, with the focus on energy, waste, water use and so on, it is very much contributing to our roadmap, and of course that really important target around social equity and health. So that was all I wanted to share with you. I have got lots of other case studies if you want to know. I hope that the slides will be shared because these links will take you through to useful touch points on our website if you want any more information.